Okay, we're starting. So please introduce yourself.
My name is Mark Lane.
Mark Lane, and we are in your house in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Today is the 15th of August, 2018. And just for the record, you did already do an interview for Shoah, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so like I told you previously, we're going to more focus on 1945 to 48, 49. But before we get there, I want you to tell me where you were born, when you were born, and what kind of family you were born into.
I was born the 3rd of August 1929 in a little village in the Carpathian Mountains, which was at that time Czechoslovakia, named Oleňovo. Translation, Deerfield.
What's the translation?
Translation into English, Deerfield.
Deerfield.
Yes.
Okay.
Oleň is a deer, and Oleňovo is Deerfield. My grandparents, my maternal grandparents, had a farm, and actually I was supposed to be born in Paris, France, but my parents lived at the time. My dad was perfecting his furriership. He became a furrier. He learned the trade in Paris.
A fur?
Furs, yes. Where I had an uncle and 3 aunts that came there after the First World War. My father
to Paris?
To Paris. But my mother wanted to have me at her mother, my maternal grandmother, so she came back to Czechoslovakia, and my father only came when he got a telegram he should come home for the bris. And
Are you the oldest child? Are you the youngest?
I was the oldest of my parents, and also the first grandchild of my maternal grandparents.
So you're the first, you're in all aspects, you're the first grandchild, you're the first son.
Right.
And your father came back from Paris to your, did he make it for your bris?
Yes, he did.
For your bris?
He did. And when he came home after he got his certificate that he graduated from the course, after a while he opened the first store.
Where?
In the capital of the Carpathians, which was at that time a town called Uzhhorod, Ungvar in Hungarian. And it was a successful business.
What kind of household are you born into? Is it religious, Orthodox,
yes,
conservative, Zionist?
Zionist Orthodox. Modern.
Modern Orthodox.
Modern Orthodox. In fact, I never saw the inside of a public school. Went to Beit Sefer Amami in Hebrew and Gymnasia Ivrit, which was later on when my parents moved to a city called Munkac in Hungarian, Mukachevo in Czech, and now the Ukraine, Mukachevo. In fact, the Hebrew Gymnasium, as it was called, was built by mostly the Jewish merchants of the town that they were Zionists. When they went to the streets of the city and they saw mezuzah, they knocked on the doors and they said, "We're building a Hebrew school and we're selling bricks. How many bricks are you going to buy?" My father told me the story that those bricks built the gymnasium. In fact...
And this is in this town that you're born in?
And no, this was in the city, Mukachevo. The town, actually a village, where I was born, had no electricity, no running water, no phones, no doctors, no dentists. They had two churches, one Catholic and one Eastern Orthodox, and no government offices. In fact, my birth was recorded in the church. And after the war, when I needed a birth certificate, my father took a trip to the little village, and the same priest was still alive that recorded my birth. And but it was we lived the full Jewish life. My grandfather, Mazidi Zichrono Livracha, he led the service and read the Torah on Shabbat.
So you grew up in this small village, basically. Your father had a shop in this in the big city, and he would commute.
No, we spent well, my holidays were spent at the farm. I used to come there every summer, but we lived in the city.
In the city, and would you say that your family was lower middle class, upper middle class, middle class? Like
upper middle class.
Upper middle class. So
yes.
you guys had a good. You guys were okay financially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Father had a good business. We had a live-in maid.
You had a live-in maid.
And who incidentally learned Yiddish.
Was that the mother tongue in the house?
The mother
Yiddish?
tongue was Yiddish, and my second tongue was Hebrew.
Hebrew.
Yes, we had Shitat Hetzliah, Ivrit be'Ivrit. Whatever could be thought was taught in Hebrew. In fact, our Menahel was Professor Kugel, who came from Palestine, and when the war started, he had the British passport, so he went back, and after the state was reestablished, he was the first mayor of Chulon.
Of Chulon, okay. And Kugel.
Kugel, Professor Kugel.
And there's a very famous Kikal Kugel in Chulon.
Yes, well, that was our.
So he was your principal.
He was our principal in the
Very nice.
gymnasia.
Very nice. So you basically, are kind of sheltered, in a way, from, like you're not in a public school. You're not. Are you interacting with the locals, with the kids, or is it all Jewish?
Well, when I was a small child, before I went to school until age 6, the little Ukrainian boys in because it was a little Ukrainian village, although it was Czechoslovakia. So I also spoke Ukrainian in those days, and so I had little playboys.
Okay.
You know, with the little local
but after
boys.
First grade, you're strictly in a Jewish environment.
Strictly Jewish environment.
Strictly Jewish environment.
Yes.
Now, do you belong to any youth movement?
Yes, as by age 6, the first grade of elementary school, we had. I was a Beitari. I grew up in Beitar. I wore the uniform. I learned Shtegetot Lerden.
Gam Zohi v'gam Zo.
Yes, and
did that come from your father, or
yes, my father
was a revisionist.
Although he was, he went to the yeshiva as a young man, and the rabbi of the city was a rabbi anti-Zionist. He broke with him in 1926 when he became a Zionist, and we grew up in a very active Zionist home.
Can you explain to me what activist means? What does that mean?
Well, in those days, what it meant, especially with the school, we had there was a small unit of Shomeret Tzahir.
Yep.
But a lot of my buddies were members of Beitar.
Shomeret Tzahir was.
It was on the sides, right? Although I had an uncle who later on, when he went to Israel, was a member of a Shomeret Tzahir kibbutz, Kibbutz HaOgen.
Kibbutz HaOgen.
which in those days was in Kfar Saba, a Czech kibbutz of Shomeret Seir.
So the house, your father's, for the record, the name of your father and mother.
My father's name was Menachem Mendel. Menachem Mendel Lachmanovich. And my mother's name was Sarah, and her maiden name was Mermelstein.
Now, so you grew up in a house that's quite active politically?
Yes.
Politically, it's an active house. You're
That's
taught
right.
about Jabotinsky.
That's right.
Sure.
Yes.
And
in fact, he came to the town on one occasion.
do you remember? Or?
And vaguely.
Vaguely. You were young. Yeah. He came for a lecture or?
Yeah, on a speaking tour.
On a speaking tour. What do you remember of that? Or?
I remember wearing my uniform. And we welcomed him waiting for him at the train station.
You waited for him at the train station? So let's talk a little bit about pre-World War II. So do you, when the war breaks out, I mean, you're only 10 years old. When the war breaks out, you're 10.
Yes.
And Slovakia is, by March 38, already taken over. Well, Bohemia is taken over by the Germans.
That's right.
Slovakia gets its independence.
Well, a fascist government.
Fascist government, which is a puppet government of the Nazi regime.
That's right.
Does your life and your family's life start to change?
In the beginning, when the Hungarians came in, they...
Do you speak Hungarian?
Yes, I still do.
So at the beginning when the Hungarians came in?
The night that they came in, they broke into the store and they stole most of the furs. And what I remember, my dad told me, they had a lot of storage of the fur that they were storing, and he paid most of the values of the furs to his customers. And after a while, they took away his license to run a store, so he went in. He bought lumber by the acres and hired, woodcutters and so on, and they shipped the lumber to Budapest until he wanted to go into the fur business again, and he went to Budapest and came home with a non-Jew. His name was Shereg, and he gave him 50% of the business without investing one penny, just to be able to use the name. Nevertheless, every time customers came in, they asked to see for the boss, and he pointed to my father.
So they had a gentleman's agreement.
Yes.
They had a gentleman's agreement.
Right.
And that allowed your father to still provide for the family and...
Yes, I had two brothers and a sister.
Younger.
And by 1944, even my youngest brother Willie went to the gymnasia. He was in the first grade gymnasia. All of us went to Hebrew school, which was a private school, and had to pay tuition and so on. It was quite expensive, but we're doing well.
When do you start to feel the change?
Well, what the Hungarians did, they confiscated...
Hold on a sec.
They confiscated all the radios. So we shouldn't be able to listen to
what's really
the
happening.
BBC and or my dad listened to Paris radio, which...
He spoke French, of course, your father.
My father spoke French, yes. And in fact, I remember, like, it was, you see, yeah, so we had a telephone and radio, this was before TVs, and we had heavy comforters with down, and my dad used to put the comforters over his head and listen to the BBC and to Radio Paris. In fact, there was a broadcast from London in French. I remember like it was today. It said Radio Paris Mans, Radio Paris Mans, Radio Paris Allemand. It started off with this. It says Radio Paris
Say it in French.
lies.
Yeah.
Radio Paris lies. Radio Paris is German. But so we were up to date with the news. Plus also people came to our area, which was not far from basically the Polish border. And we had a girl, her name was Pearl, who gave her a Hungarian name, Gyöngyi. And she came to our house, and she survived only till, unfortunately, 1944, where she was taken to Auschwitz, but she lived an extra few years when she came across the Polish border into our area.
In I think so you're living in an area that's controlled by Hungary,
Yes.
right? By the Hungarians.
Yes.
Horthy.
Horthy Miklos, yes, Miklos Horthy.
Now
He was the regent.
he was the regent of Hungary and an ally of Hitler.
He slightly was admiral
He was an admiral.
for a non-existent port, because during the Hungarian Austrian Empire, they had a port in Fiume, which is part now of Yugoslavia, but he still kept the title of admiral.
Of admiral, even though he
Vite, and Vite is Horthy Miklos, hero,
hero,
referred to him as a hero,
Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Austro-Hungarian
Yeah.
Empire.
So he is the head of the state, and he is complying with anti-Semitic laws,
Right,
right? But he's sending Jews to labor camps,
that's right.
and does that affect
Which was not a concentration camp, which are labor camps.
Yeah, but they would. There were people died there.
That's right. Well, in the case of my father, because we had the fur business, the commander of the area, the Carpathians, his wife was a customer. And every time a call-up came, my father took the document of the call-up and a silver fox or a piece of mink or whatever, went to see the general's wife, and a couple of weeks later, a release came. So he didn't until 1943, where he had to go in. It was during summertime. He went in for, we were called up, for 2 months. In fact, he came home for 2 weeks, even those days. They were, he was in the region of Lake Balaton, which is the only lake Hungary has. He came home with a beautiful tan. They were able to pay off the Hungarian soldiers. They were in charge of them, and they brought in kosher food. They were able to bribe them, and he came home after 2 months.
And this whole time you're at home?
At home, school was functioning
Really?
regularly until 1944, until we were supposed to go to the ghetto.
In Budapest?
No, in our city. We had a ghetto. We had a ghetto in Munkacs.
And for the record, let's just say that in 1944, Horthy is overthrown.
Right,
by
and the
Adolf
Nazis.
Hitler, because he wanted to make a deal with Stalin.
Right.
And the Iron Cross come into action.
Right.
And they are a different story.
Right. Well, the Iron Cross was active mostly in Hungary proper.
Right.
And so we didn't really experience them because the Germans came in. And incidentally, I just want to add, the thing about the gymnasium, all our teachers, without exception, even our sports trainer, Dr. Strasser, had a PhD.
Wow.
In our school, for instance, we started Latin at age 10, English at age 10. Mostly, we called our teacher the same one that taught us Latin and English. We called her the Anglička. She was a little woman, about less than 5 feet tall, from Budapest. And her husband used to bring her lunch. And if he was a couple of minutes late, she gave him a dressing down in front of the class. But it was a wonderful school. In fact, you spoke to my daughter Suzette. She was she went for a trip about 4 years ago. And I gave her a description of where to go to, where the school is and so on. And she went to my school. It is now a collegiate. And she says, it's beautiful. It was always beautiful.
It's now a what?
A collegiate.
A college?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's called the collegiate college.
And it's in the Ukraine?
It's in Ukraine.
Western Ukraine.
Western Ukraine, yeah.
And another question I wanted to ask you about your childhood. Before the war, up until 1944, did you guys ever deal with any anti-Semitism in your town?
Well, only when the the Iron Cross. I mean, but there was a section of it. For instance, the corner of our street, which incidentally my daughter couldn't find because it was called Tukoli, which was a Hungarian poet named after him. Of course, after the war, the Ukrainians changed the name of the streets. She couldn't find anybody. I gave her a description of the house and how to go there, but they couldn't find it because the names were changed. So, but on the corner of our street, there was a bakery where we bought our bread. The challahs and the cakes and cookies and so on and so forth, my mother baked at home. But bread we used to buy in that bakery. And on this occasion, my father was buying bread, and this Hungarian Nazi came in, and he said, and the owner of the business was a Volksdeutsche. Volksdeutsche being German living in different countries, but he was ethnically German. And he asked him, he says, why do you sell good Hungarian bread? My father told me this story. Why do you sell good Hungarian bread to a Jew? And he said he was a young man, he said, you're not old enough to wipe your nose, and I will sell bread to whomever I want to. And in front of him, he told my father, anytime that you need bread, you know where to get it. He was not a Nazi. In fact, we, for years, the custom was to make tjond and kugel for Shabbat. And on the way for Friday evening services, we took a couple of pots to the bakery, and they were earthen pots. They were put in the oven, and Saturday, on the way home from shul, we picked up the tjond and the kugel.
In 1944, everything changes. Yeah.
By that time, Professor Kugel was not there. I forgot the name of the who became director. One of the teachers. We came to school, and he said, "The school is closed. You all have to go home, and we have to go to the ghetto." And they established a ghetto in a part of the city which we never knew existed. And it wasn't like they allocated where to live. My father had to we found a place with no electricity, without water, and we whitewashed it to make it livable. Mercifully, we were only there for 3 weeks.
And after 3 weeks?
After 3 weeks, we were taken to the brick factory. We were told to go to the brick factory. Everybody was allowed to carry one valise, but that valise, when we came to the brick factory, was taken away. In fact, my mother took several bars of soap. We didn't know where we were going, and the soap was at a premium at the time. They broke the pieces of soap in half to make sure, just in case the Jews are hiding something inside the soap, jewelry and so on. The jewelry, my mother, was a big mistake. We dug in the garden a hole and we buried the jewelry, my mother's old stuff. And when we left, I guess our non-Jewish neighbors came and they saw freshly turned sod. They opened up, and of course they found whatever they wanted to find. And we were taken to the brick factory because they had a railway siding. And at the railway siding, we had the cattle cars waiting for us. And it was tragic. My boobies, my maternal grandmother's sister, one sister, she had polio. And she lived in the house all those years. And how they got her loaded on the train or what happened to her, we never know. Whether they killed her right away, shot her, or on our holidays every year, she is the one that raised the children. She's a wonderful, wonderful one. In fact, one of our granddaughters in Potomac, Maryland, is called Rivka Pnina after her Mima Pearl.
She was your aunt, your grandmother's sister?
Grandmother's sister, great aunt,
yeah,
whom I adored.
Yeah.
And
from there on, you guys...
the trip took, we were loaded, there was barely any room to sit, never mind to lie down. They had one pail given for sanitary purposes. Terribly hot, although it was only the 5th of May. The 5th of May, incidentally, means a great deal to me. That was the day that we left for Auschwitz. That was also the day that I was liberated by the American forces.
A year later, exactly.
In Gonskirchen, that's right.
A year later.
And a trip that should have taken maybe 5 hours, because we were not far from.
Sure.
Took 3 days. We were every time shunted to a siding. Every time a German military train came, we were shunted on the side. And by that time, I mean, the food that the few sandwiches that we were able to take were gone. By the time we arrived in, we didn't know where, in Birkenau, Mengele in person, the murderer was waiting in with his finger pointed, who to the left and who to the right. Yes, and after that I saw him almost daily. To this day, I mean, if you showed me a picture of him in his civilian clothing, I wouldn't recognize him. But in his German uniform, I certainly would. He was also at the selections later on, you know, that we went through. And I also saw him because, yeah, let me just get back to the arrival in Birkenau. So my mother and 2 brothers and sisters went to one side. My father and I went to the other. The following day we found out, when my father asked one of the inmates that was there for a while, because they said there's special camps for women and children. It says they call it Frauen und Kinderlager.
Sorry.
Frauen und Kinderlager. And my father asked what happened to the families. And the chimneys were see the flames come through onto the chimneys. He says they were up in smoke. So we found out what happened.
Right, quite soon after your arrival.
The day after.
How old were you at the time? 1944?
15 and a half.
15 and a half.
15 and a half.
Who told you this? Your father told you? How did he tell you this?
We were together with my father in the same barracks, the guy.
And
In fact, the same day, I remember, diagonally from our house, in the city, lived the gentleman. His name was Katona, which means soldier in Hungarian. And he wore a Loden cape and a hat with a big fur and boots. His basement we had a basement in our house, but it wasn't deep enough. He had a deep basement, so we were if there is an air raid, we had to go across the road, go to his basement. We never knew that he was a Jew. The second day we were in Auschwitz. Who comes opposite us? Mr. Katona. He was a city engineer. And my father says, Mr. Katona, what are you doing here? He says, I'm a Jew just like you. And so my father and I, we were together for 8 days. And then they took him, they said, and which happened to be true, to Warsaw. They were trying to remove any signs of the Warsaw uprising of the ghetto. And so they took people from Auschwitz to work. We were discussing who's going to, should I go to Warsaw? My father says, well, because there's going to be construction involved. In this instance, it was true. Maybe it'll be too hard work. Stay here and I'll go. So he did. And so here I am. I remained in Auschwitz. And 16 boys from high schools, they insisted for gymnasiums, they formed a Scheißkommando. Scheißkommando, what does the Scheißkommando do? We had a barrel, a big barrel mounted on a four-wheeled
cart
with 16 ropes, and we each had to pull that, and Auschwitz-Birkenau was divided into many different camps, and we went from camp to clean the latrines. We had pails on the end of ropes, which were lowered, emptied the stuff, and emptied it into that big barrel, and we emptied it not far from the crematorium. So we knew what was going on. And once in a while somebody committed suicide, we also had to pick up that person and take him not far from the crematorium where he was taken. They had a Sonderkommando. The Sonderkommando, in that year, they used to change him every 3 months because they didn't want to leave any witnesses. And the Sonderkommando then was from our city. The doctors, the lawyers, all the intelligentsia. And they had boys my age that were in our barrack. And we were 6 boys in that barracks. There was a couple from Lithuania. I was the only one from my area, and a couple from Poland. And although we all spoke Yiddish, our common language, we didn't want anybody to understand, was Hebrew. We were all speaking Hebrew. And in fact, one day when the transport started to arrive from Saloniki, from Greece, which was a port city that even the porters were Jews. The port was closed on Shabbat because it was the porters were the workers of the longshoremen, as they say, were all Jews. And this boy came in, and there was our heating system was bricks all the way, full length of the barrack. Well, it gave very little heat, but whatever. So he stood on there, walking alongside and shouting in Hebrew, "Yesh po mishu shemdaber ivrit." So we took him. His name was Ashkenazi, strangely enough, and I'll tell you a story about him after, when we were in Austria. But anyway, so we took him. He was one of us. And the advantage of the Scheißkommando was that we also were mail carriers. Somebody went to, so let's say, for instance, one of the camps was called Canada. Canada was the camp, was the women only, sorting out all the stuff that was taken from the arrivals, and all the good stuff was shipped to Germany. And on one of our trips, near the fence, was my auntie, well, a distant aunt, Magda, and her 3 daughters, who incidentally are still alive. One lives in Brooklyn, and 2 live in Israel. And so right away, they threw a sweater and socks, and so underneath my striped rags, I had warm clothing, and this helped me later on to survive that horrible winter of the Death March in 1945. And as I said, we carried mails looking for somebody and so on. So we were given a piece of bread as a reward and so on.
So this job kind of kept you guys alive?
Yes.
You were always on the move, doing.
We were always on the move from camp, different camps.
Nobody could really.
Yeah, we also had, the fences were electrified, and in the summertime, there was an area wider than the stable where big weeds grew. So we had to pull out. One of our jobs was to pull out the weeds, because they figured maybe somebody will try to escape somehow, I don't know. But we had to, so they turned off the electricity. But once in a while, they just have some fun with the Jews, they did turn off the electricity. And if you touched the wire, that was the end. So that's what they did to us. And later on, during the high holidays, we had selections. In one instance, they took a boy, they had a soccer field, but they played among themselves. On the soccer field, we had to go stand in line. They hammered took the boy and hammered a board on top of him. You had to, whoever was tall enough went back to the barracks. Whoever wasn't took to the gas chamber. On another occasion, on one occasion, the last occasion, the first time in the history of Birkenau anything like this ever happened, we knew that we were going to die. Just a question of time. The next second, the next hour, the next day, we never knew when. So we were in the big hall adjoining the gas chamber. All of a sudden, Achtung, and we were naked. All of us, 200 and some odd boys, naked, and the commander is there, says we're going to have races. Anyway, whoever ran fast enough went back to the barracks. The rest of the boys were taken into the gas chamber. I have a very good friend of mine who I'm still in touch. His name is Arthur Brown. He lives in on Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn, and he's got a place in Deerfield Beach in Florida. And 51 boys went back to the barracks, him and myself included. And in fact, how did we meet? We were in Florida. It was a very warm evening. We were invited for supper to a friend of ours, Mrs. Techman. She was Hungarian. She was a great cook at one end. And this gentleman, who I never saw before, was sitting at the other. I always wore, for Shabbat, for instance, Israel style, a pair of white pants, white shoes, white shirt, short sleeves. Whoever didn't like it was his problem, but I went to shul that way. So it was Friday evening, and then Mrs. Tachem introduced us to him. Yeah, and a warm evening. And even though the air conditioning was on, it was warm. And this gentleman wearing a beige suit, a vest, and a tie, sitting at the other end of the table. And we were introduced, and we started to talk. And then he noticed my number. And he stands up, takes off his jacket, closes up his shirt sleeve. Not only are we 20 numbers apart, but the same guy that tattooed me, tattooed him. Because several guys did the tattooing, but we recognize the work. And it's, so we've been in touch ever since.
I wanna move forward a little to the end of the war. Okay, I know that we're going over a lot right now, that we're not dealing with Auschwitz and your experience, but we gotta move a little forward, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
And like we said, we know that it's all documented on the Spielberg Shoah.
Yeah.
Where are you? You mentioned the Death March. You mentioned May 5th, 1945.
This was January the 8th, 1945, on the Death March.
That's when you were liberated?
No, that's when we're leaving Birkenau. Hello?
Okay, so you leave Auschwitz-Birkenau on January?
The 8th, 1945.
Okay.
Bitter cold. And
this is the Death March.
Yeah. If it wasn't for the clothing that I got, I would be dead. Also, we had Russian soldiers with us. They were marching as a group.
Oh, prisoners.
Prisoners, yeah. Against all the rules of they're supposed to be, military personnel are not supposed to be in concentration camps. They were, and all of a sudden a military but a Volkswagen without the roof, had a machine gun mounted. They came in, they killed quite a few of the Russians.
Just
machine gun them.
In front of you? You saw this?
Yeah, by that time, we were used to see that it wasn't a novelty. Anyway, also, I didn't mention to you, you were asking, but the family was how religious they were and so on. I have to go back for this, because it's an important section. In 1939, a couple of months before the war started, I was holidaying at my maternal grandparents on the farm, and my booby, whom I adored, I was the first grandchild. I was king. Says there's a famous Rebbe, there's a Yeshiva Rebbe, He is 5 kilometers away in this little town. Polyana, which is a larger Jewish community, and I'm going to take you there to be blessed by the Rebbe. And she made a kvittel, you know, used to, a kvittel means put money in and so on and so forth to give to the Shabbos, to give to the Rebbe. And she told me what to do when you come. The Rebbe is going to ask you your name and what you're doing, what you're learning, and you to kiss his hand, he's going to bless you and so on. And Masesha Haya, I come in, told exactly like Bubi said. The Rebbe was sitting behind the desk. I kissed his hand, he asked me my name, what I'm studying. By age 10 I was, 1939. I was already studying Gemara, Bava Metzia. I remember like it was today. And he said to me, do you speak Yiddish? You don't speak Yiddish. He says, my child, you are going to be Matzliach. You're going to have Arichat Yamim. And nothing bad is going to happen to you. And he blessed me with the priestly blessing and so on. Yeah, he asked me how does the Gemara Bava Metzia start? I said, Shnayim Ozim Betalit. So he saw that I learned it. So he blessed me. I came out. Yeah, we hitched up one of our horses with a buggy, and I drove 5 kilometers. 10-year-old kid with the reins was exciting. And so here I am in the concentration camp. My father is gone. I don't know whether he's alive or dead. The picture of the Rebbe, talk about faith. Picture of the Rebbe was in front of my eyes. And because the Rebbe, he promised me Arichat Yamim. I didn't want to make a liar out of the Rebbe. So I said, how is it? The Rebbe said, nothing is going to happen. I'm going to have Arichat Yamim. If I die, the Rebbe is a liar. And the picture of my father also, just in case he's alive. Somebody has to be alive for him, because I know what happened to his 3 other children. And willpower. We knew, and we had news. For instance, in August, the transports from Lodz arrived. They were closing the ghetto. So we had constant news of what's going on. We know about D-Day, and so we went. There's that much. Finally, small town, I don't remember the name. Another train was waiting, and the next stop after on the train was, I hear Czech spoken. And they opened the doors, because they needed, in those days, the locomotives were on coal, they needed a lot of water, so we were supposed to get some water. And I hear Czech spoken, so I said, "Ja sam Český." And the Czech Red Cross, this was, January 1945, they were operating. I said, Czechoslovakia is occupied. The Red Cross is allowed to operate. A lady took off, I remember, a pink sweater and gave me. So on top of that sweater, I had another sweater. And I had tea and a piece of bread. And finally the train started moving again. And we arrived 2 days later in a fort type place, huge doors, must be 20 foot this thick, was built for fort, Mauthausen. We left the Mauthausen, and in Mauthausen, on one of our trips to Israel, we stopped for 3 days and in Austria, in Vienna, and I took my wife with me, went to Mauthausen. Because my friends asked me, why did you go to Mauthausen? I said, I wanted to have the feeling of going in through those huge gates as a free man and to be able to come out as a free man. And it was with me for all these years. This is why, And in fact, I felt a certain extra freedom, you know, when I was there, and that I was able. And my barrack, number 11, is still around, and they were painting. A lot of the barracks were destroyed. Very few remain. But a guy that was painting it, I told him, "Das is meine baracke." So he took off his cap, and he came and wanted to shake my hand.
Is that where you're liberated?
I was liberated, no. Yeah, so in Mauthausen, we worked in a quarry. And the quarry had 198 steps. And it was 198 steps going down, and the same 198 steps going up, carrying stone on their shoulders. I never knew what they did with those stones to this day. And we were there till the middle of March, and we're going. Where are we going? We'll find out. We were taken to a place called Gunskirchen. Gunskirchen, in fact, they refer to it as a Vernichtungslager, not a Konzentrationslager. The Vernichtungslager means they're going to finish us off. The barracks, it was a frame, but they had no floor. And you can imagine in
March
in Austria. But it was beautiful, beautiful. On our walk, we passed the city of Wels, W-E-L-S, and it was a sunny day. The stores were open, I remember, and I spoke German. And if a woman comes out from a butcher shop, and I said to her, you know, gnädige Frau, dear lady, I'm hungry, would you give me some food? Didn't even look in my direction. The Austrians, who claimed after the war that they were invaded, they pretty well waited with a hire. I don't even remember to this day what we ate there. Very little. We were skin and bone. I'll show you a picture.
Wait a sec. Not yet. Just remind me, because you have
I have a book.
microphone. Yeah.
I have a book by the unit that liberated me, the American unit, the 751st Black Panther Brigade, on May the 5th, 1945, a glorious day.
What do you remember from that day?
I remember this was a tank unit. This was the first camp they liberated. And although they themselves suffered segregation and so on and so forth in the South, they saw us, tears came down their eyes.
They were African American?
African Americans.
All of them?
All of them. And they themselves were on the command of Patton, who used the N-word very liberally. But anyway, so they liberated. That's what there was, a fighting unit. So they liberated, they left. Then came the MPs from Alabama and Arkansas, and we were bloody Jews. Yes.
They called you bloody Jews?
Well, we had bloody Jews many times. Stinking Jews. But this stinking Jew, we were pointed to go a certain direction. We didn't go that way. All our little group, including, Ashkenazi wasn't there, because he, on the walk from Mauthausen to Gunskirchen, we got up in the morning, well, as much as we could close our eyes and sleep in the bitter cold. Where's Ashkenazi? He's gone. He took off. Somehow he got a hold of a bicycle, and he said, and he was a Greek, he was from Greece, spoke Greek. He says, Greek, you got a job in a farm. And we saw him in Linz, not far from the Luftwaffe airport, also on a bicycle.
When you're liberated, are you sent to a DP camp?
Well, we went to a little village across, instead of going to the direction that the MPs pointed, we crossed the road and we came to a village, and there was no school, and the Americans took over the school building from about across the road. There was the house that the priest lived. They were gone, so we got the house that the priest lived in, and we were a terrible bunch. The Americans on the schoolyard, they had the trucks with material, with goods, you know, foods and all kinds
Cigarettes,
of stuff.
candy.
Yeah, yeah. And at night we just waited to go across the road to be able to
Empty the truck.
whatever we could. Yeah.
Of course.
And
Do you know where your father is at this moment?
yeah, no, I don't know
No
this
idea.
father.
No idea.
No idea. So we started to eat. Yeah. So what happened on one farmhouse? Interesting little story. There's a Hungarian flag flying. So I'm the only guy that speaks Hungarian. And I come, and by that time there was 5 of us. And he says, I tell the woman in Hungarian, prepare food, you know. And they had a porch in the front, a long table, with benches on each side. And half an hour, she comes out, brings a tray with potatoes. And and we were sitting on one side, on the other side, get away from there. We tipped over the table with the potatoes. He said, this is not food for Jews. Where is your Speisekammer? Speisekammer is with the food, what do you call it in English? A pantry. We come into, we go to the pantry, hams, yes.
Hold on, wait. We're going to stop here for a second. Okay. Is the coffee? I'll come and bring it. Is it ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go get it. You just stay put.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, my dear. I'll pour it in. Right. Is it done?
Yeah.
Pour it in.
You want some
Right.
milk?
It's instant coffee, right?
Okay, you want milk?
If you have.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I was making coffee the other night and I put salt instead of sugar.
Oy vey.
Here we go. This right here. Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, nothing.
Okay. So let me just make sure the sound is okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So we left off that we're at the end of the war. You told me the story now about the Hungarian woman where you threw the potatoes.
Yes.
But we got that. So what I would like to, where I would like to go now, and I would like to more focus is, it's 1945. You're alone. You're with friends, of course. You're with your guys. What do you do? I mean, where do you go?
All right. My father, when we parted, said, whoever stays alive comes back home.
Okay. He did tell you that. He's like,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. 2 weeks after the liberation, I got typhus. And I was put in a hospital in Linz, in Austria. It was a Catholic hospital with the nurses with their billowing headdresses. And In fact, one day I asked her, the nurse who looked after me, I said, how does it feel to treat Jews? She says, to us it doesn't make a difference. A patient is a patient, and we look after everybody. There's, words. Even though the Catholic Church when I was 9 years, no, or younger. I was 7 years old. Christmas time, teenagers got dressed with Saint Michael, they call it Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus, with canes and waiting for us to come out for school and chased us, with their poles. Catholic schools. So anyway.
You're in the hospital?
In the hospital, and came out of the hospital. Of course, we were still living in the little house across from the school, and we had we had cans of tuna and cheese and so on. We needed clothing. We sold the food for yardage, and the tailor had a couple of nice suits made. And
in the hospital?
No. After we came out, after I got well.
Okay, so after you got well, where'd you go?
In the same little house that we were across from the school, the church's, the priest's house.
Right.
And the Americans started to make transports to repatriate ex-inmates, and they were forming. So we registered for repatriation, and came the day. The Americans. It was a beautiful, sunny day, and unknowingly, we were not far from the Danube. And in fact, Mauthausen, we crossed the bridge. That was the bridge over the Danube, which we didn't know when we were there. We weren't much interested. But anyway, so the Americans, they came with buses, and we went, they gave us a lift to a boat. We boarded the boat. In those days, Austria was divided among the Allied forces.
Oh, yes.
And the eastern part of Austria was Russian. But we put on the gorgeous boat, and we sailed down until the boat stopped. And the Russian soldiers, with Kalashnikovs, in those days they had the magazine in the round, out. We got out, just line up. Line up. So where are we going? Wait. So I spoke Ukrainian, which is very similar to Russian. And we marched, and we came to what was a concentration camp. And we were given the dish to go. The only difference was that now the soup had potatoes and pieces of meat, that the food was better, but we slept in the same barracks, and we were waiting.
What concentration camp?
Yeah, but no, it was a concentration for transport for people that they were being repatriated. They had to wait an X amount of people to do that. And we said, this is how we're treated. And I said to the Russians, I said, "Ya Evreis, I'm a Jew." He says, with us, everybody is equal. Anyway, we waited for a transport, and we waited for trucks or buses or whatever. And he says, where is the transport? Pishkom, in Russian means on foot. We walked to the Czech border of Bratislava for 2.5 days. We slept in the field. Okay, it was August, so it wasn't too bad. We came to Bratislava. The Jewish community was quite well organized already. I remember we got 1,500 crowns, which wasn't a lot of money, but I was able to get a haircut. And the place where we were, the meals were delicious, of course. And then to go back to my city, I had to go through Hungary. So I had to go to Hungary, and we got on the train, and to go first of all to Budapest. We came to the Budapest, the Saint Elizabeth School in Hungarian, St. Erzsébet, was taken over by the Jewish community, and each room, each class had beds in it and so on, and we were welcomed with tears and with happiness. And on the blackboards, used to have the blackboards in each class. What do you call them? Class blackboard. People left messages, and we go from room to room, and lo and behold, a message from my father. I'm alive. That's how I found out that my dad was alive. I'm alive. I heard that you're in Bucharest, and I went to Bucharest. Why in the world he thought that I went to Bucharest? I never went, So I went to Bucharest. By that time he has left. But I decided that after crossing each other a couple of times, that Prague also came into play because we had cousins there. That I remember these words, that whoever stays alive comes back home. So I came back to Munkacs, and a couple of weeks after that, so what happened, my mother's youngest brother, he was liberated in October of 1944 by the Russians somewhere along the line. And I had an Uncle Zolman who was in the Hungarian labor units, and behind the front, the Jews had to take care of the animals. They had the artillery pulled by horses. This is a modern long distance. Hello.
Hello. I am calling about your recent home depot delivery. Please take 1 minute to let us know about your experience. This will be used to further improve our delivery business. Did the delivery team arrive in your delivery window? Press 1 for yes, or 2 for no. How satisfied were you with the delivery team in regards to protecting your home and merchandise from damage?
Yes.
How satisfied were you with the overall helpfulness of the delivery team?
Very.
Thinking about your experience with the delivery team, how likely would you want the same delivery team to make a future delivery? Please select between 5 and 1, with 5 being extremely likely and 1 being extremely unlikely. At the time of purchase,
So he was liberated in October, and he was also learning the fur trade from my father, and he lived in our house, and he came to our house.
So when you come to the house, is anybody there? To the family house?
No, I didn't come to the house. I'm telling the story of my Uncle David, of what happened, how the house was. So he came to the house. He had the key to the house, of course. He opens the door. After we left for Auschwitz, the house was not touched. It was robbed. Everything was as it was left. So he moved in, and because they formed the cooperative of farriers, and the chief of the cooperative, his name was a Ukrainian named Vorozhilchak, who worked for us as a farrier. He became the head, and Uncle David worked at the cooperative until about 3 weeks after he moved in. He sees there is a truck in front of our house, and the furniture is being loaded. And there is Russian officers there, and my Uncle David wants to go to the house. He says, where you going? He says, this is my house. He says, no, this is not, this was your house, it's not your house. They emptied the house, took away all the,
His house.
our house.
Yeah.
A Russian.
Who? The Russians?
The Russians emptied it on the truck, loaded it up, we're gone. But anyway, so he rented a house with enough beds, you know.
So who's the
there's
first
a-
person you see from your family?
My first person, my family, was my Uncle David, who rented this house for anybody that to stay alive, to have somewhere to sleep. And about 2 weeks after I came back on a Friday morning. My father arrived with my Uncle Zalman, who was in Siberia after the Hungarian front collapsed. They took him to Siberia. But they formed, he was in Czech uniform, because they formed two Czech armies,
Sure.
one in London
Yeah, and one of
and
Russia.
one in Russia. And he-
Spodova. What was his name? Sobodova?
Svoboda.
Svoboda. Yeah. His army.
Yeah. So, incidentally, the word Svoboda means freedom,
Yeah.
translation.
Yeah. So you reunite with your father.
My father,
How was that?
and tears and tears, tears and tears, tears and joy that somebody stayed alive. Then what happened was my father, by that time in all these travelings, he had different currencies. He had dollars, he had Hungarian, whatever, several currencies. And we were not going to stay in Munkac. My father wasn't going to work for the cooperative. And my father, because my mother died and there was no way who was going to keep a kitchen and cook and so on and so forth. And my father was concerned with that about me. So he didn't want us, we're going to leave for Czechoslovakia, because we saw what was happening, that this is not going to be Czechoslovakia. Again, it's part of the Ukraine. We're not going to stay there. But he had in a valise stuff that he brought with him home. Incidentally, he bought several pairs of children's shoes, just in case my brother Willie and my sister, my other brother was alive. Hope against hope. And so he went, there was two marketplaces in the city. One was kept on Monday, one was on Thursday. Anyway, so he was going to the market to sell the stuff that he had in the valise. One of the pair of pants to this day, and he never found out, was a pair of German officers' pants with red stripes on the side, which means it was a high-ranking officer, a general. They had red stripes on the side of their pants. And the NKVD was circulating the market, and they found they saw the pair of pants. They arrested my father, and they took him to was a Baron Schönborn, who had the big palace, which they made their headquarters. That's where they took him, because I followed him. Also, he had all this currency. I was 10 paces behind him. He dropped the money, and I picked it up. Anyway, they took him there. I called my Uncle David right away. And Vorozhilchak, who was the head of the cooperative, he was a communist. And through him, my father was released. He says, I got a hold of it. And the very next day, we didn't wait. We left for what today is Liberec, used to be called Reichenberg in German, the capital of the Sudeten.
Liberec. You went to Liberec.
Liberec.
Uh-huh.
And in Liberec, again, there was a company of furriers who had a lunchroom. And my father said, I'm going to come and work if you're going to feed my son. and they allowed me to come to have my meals at the
Did you go with
company.
the uncles or just you and your father?
Just my father and I.
Where do the uncles stay?
And well, they were married. They stayed in different. They had their own houses. They gave.
But David,
In fact, I was 17 years old. My father Zalman, who was in the uniform, was looking for an apartment. I took him to a street. I said, "Which house do you want?" Put me to a house. I knock on the door. Germans. I'm packing a rouse. And he's a 70-year-old kid. They listened with 2 pieces of valises. They left. They got the house.
What city is this?
In Liberec.
Weren't the Sudeten Germans being expelled?
Expelled. We saw them at the street that we were on. They marched at 3 o'clock in the morning. We heard footsteps. We opened the window. There they are walking, being chased to the railway station to leave. They expelled all the Germans. Replaced them with Czechs, you know. And we got an apartment. In fact, the apartment we were in belonged to a German who had books on Esperanto. And in about 3 months, I learned Esperanto. Interesting language. And right then in February of 1946, I don't remember the date exactly, that the son of our president, Masaryk,
Jan Masaryk.
was defenestrized. He was thrown out the window and then
Jan
assassinated.
Masaryk, that was in 48, my friend.
Was it in 48 he was assassinated?
Well, he jumped out of the window or
Yeah,
committed
well,
suicide.
it was 48. I didn't remember the date.
Because the communists took power in
No, they-
February. This is before.
Yeah, so maybe he wasn't killed yet. But in any event, the country, it was a lot of Jews in the government,
Slansky,
Slansky, a lot of the members of the
Communist Party.
the Communist
Yeah.
Party.
but
They spent their
Czechoslovakia
time-
at the time was still democratic
That's right.
until 48.
Yeah,
until the
but
coup.
well, my father saw it coming,
And what's the decision?
and in February of 1946, we crossed into Bavaria by from Chomutov, a town not far from the border, and we came to, there was DP camp in Bamberg, in Bavaria. I even remember the name of the American colonel who was in command. It was an Italian name, Capilongo.
Sounds Italian.
Yeah. And I, speaking English and so on, I had a good chance with the Americans, and we stayed in what they call a caserne, a military, a former military fort called Ulanen Kaserne, and because it was the Ulanenstraße. And we weren't there long. They were forming a new DP camp in a place called Bad Windsheim. Bad Windsheim was a spa town, but it was also a Luftwaffe base, and the Luftwaffe built a settlement for the pilots.
I need you not to bang on the table.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The tripod's on the table. Every time you bang it, the camera shakes. It's okay. Put your hand, it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
They were nice little houses. They had fridges, they had stoves, electricity, and a nice little town. And in fact, my father was the president of the community. Later he became, my sister was born in Bad Windsheim in 1948.
Excuse me?
My father remarried.
Okay.
And my sister, who I'm very...
In the DP camp.
in a DP camp. I'm very close to my sister. In fact, my son spent this last Sunday, he was in New York, and with the family, they spent the night with them. They live in White Plains, New York. We're very close. to be
Who did your father remarry?
marry a lovely lady. Her name was Lily, and
She was from where?
she was from Ungvar,
Where's that?
which was the capital of the Carpathians,
Okay.
but they spoke Hungarian,
Okay.
and she sounded like Zsa Gabor.
Okay.
The same accent.
Same accent.
In fact, when our daughter was at the University of Jerusalem, so we used to send tapes. It wasn't like today you pick up a phone, it costs pennies. We phoned once a month for 3 minutes. It was $6. When dollars were dollars.
Yeah.
And
So you guys are at the DP camp. Your sister's born there. Where are you guys going? Like, what's the idea?
well, I became the secretary of a lady, a Dutch lady, who was in charge. Her name was Maraijen van Binsbergen, who wore American uniform, but she worked for the UNRWA, and who, in fact, shot a German in Amsterdam. They came in, she went through the back door, the Germans came in back door to the front door, and she shot a German to save their child. And I became her secretary, and she had the Jeep, and I used her Jeep. She thought I was carrying, well, I did carry food from the warehouses to the but the Kurort became the headquarters for the DP camp. Kurort means like a spa, you know, the baths, used to be the baths. But I was able to use the Jeep to carry stuff she didn't know for the Haganah.
How do you get connected with the Haganah in the camp?
There's a picture. Look at this picture.
This is where?
This is in Germany, and
You have rifles.
look again what they are.
They're wood.
Aha. They're not.
We'll do the pictures after.
They're not rifles.
How do you, in the DP camp, this is a question that I have to you. How do you get in contact with Haganah? What's the story behind that?
Well, we had ex-Palestine legionnaires. You know, today I wonder
Jewish
if...
Brigade?
Jewish Brigade. And I had a cousin in the Jewish Brigade. And the Haganah, they knew everything. They knew who the leaders were in the community and so on. My father was also the messing officer. If he would have been a crook, he could have become a millionaire on the black market. He arranged for kosher meat, for instance, that there was an abattoir in Nuremberg. It was owned by a Jew called Hamburger, believe it or not, and he arranged for kosher food.
Yes. How do you get in contact with the Haganah? How did
They got in contact
Please
with
tell
us.
Okay. Who?
The Haganah?
They had
With
access to come
young-
into the camps?
Yeah, there was no, the camps,
We're open.
had no fence,
Yeah.
wasn't a question.
And what
of
are they
that.
telling you?
They're telling you, they sent us to Veldering for training, and the British were hunting for military age boys, and we had this was on a farm on top of a mountain, and we had a forester who got paid, and when he saw military vehicles, let off a couple of shots. We knew, and the books disappeared, that we were learning the growing of trees and agriculture, and the stuff was put away that shouldn't have been
And you're
seen.
doing this for how long?
About 4 weeks.
So they take you for training. How
Training.
old are you?
At that time, I was 17 and a half, almost 18 years
Almost
old.
18 years old. But you're with Haganah now.
Yes.
not Beitar.
I know. I was also trained. Yeah, it's a long story.
Okay.
In I almost was also on the Altalena. This came later. So let's get back to.
Yeah.
Let's finish off with Germany.
Okay, let's finish up with Germany. So you're in a Haganah, you're in a DP camp, but then you're
DP
also in a
camp.
Haganah camp
Well, yeah, there's for training, yeah.
for training.
In a place called Feldafing,
So, and it's in Germany.
Germany, Bavaria.
Your father knows about this,
Of course.
Yeah. And there's people from Israel or from the Jewish Brigade or the Haganah. Who's training you?
Haganah.
Haganah.
Yeah.
Aliyah Bet,
Aliyah Bet.
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And after that,
And they're telling you that you're going to come to Palestine.
Right,
And you're
exactly.
Gonna da-da-da.
so I discussed with my father about going to Palestine. So he says, what am I going to do in Palestine? With the fur business, how am I going to make a living? Who's going to buy furs? They can't buy enough bread. So we discussed that I'm going to go. I said, I'm going. And in the meantime, they made a go-away party for myself and two other guys. Their father was a druggist in Poland. And I got up on the table at Sionut, and I said, we're going, we have a chance, we have to fight, because they said there'll obviously be, the Arabs are not going to agree with it, and so on and so forth, because they never agreed with the partition and so on, and we have to be prepared, and so on and so forth, and I'm going to Palestine. And my dad says, in Yiddish, he says, and what's going to happen, God forbid, if you got killed? I said, well, if I'll get killed, I'll get killed with an arms in my hand and dying for something instead of dying like sheep in Auschwitz. And that, because he cried, and he dead quiet and died. He said, I'm not going to die for nothing. I'm going to die for something. And incidentally, that's how come I ended up later in Canada, because actually I was, when did the Korean War start?
50.
In 50? Yeah, 50, that's the year that he wanted me to come to the States, but he didn't want me to come. I wanted to volunteer to the American Army because I felt that I owed them for liberating me, and here I'm a veteran of the Israeli Army. He says, no way. So I made arrangements for me to come to Canada eventually.
So you go to Palestine
Yes.
on a boat?
Got in the boat. I got a picture of the boat.
Okay, well, we don't have it here, but yeah, here we are. On
Yeah,
the boat.
yeah.
First,
First.
where does the boat leave from?
Yeah, hang on. So first, after I said goodbye to my father, they sent me to Marseille. The Haganah sent me to Marseille in a place called Grand Arenas. I think it was a former army base for the French army. And I was working for the Brigade.
For the what?
For the Brigade, so Aliyah Bet. It was called the Brigade. And
So you're in Marseille.
in Marseille, in Grand Arenas. And we loaded people on anything that could sail. Unfortunately, most of them were caught by the Brits and taken in turn to Cyprus until the establishment of the state.
Sure.
Only later on could they come. And
When you're in Marseille, what year is it?
1947,
Is it before the
beginning
UN partition?
48.
So it's after the partition.
47.
It's after the UN partition.
What year was the vote for the partition?
The partition was November
Of 47.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as I said, we loaded anybody that could, that would sail, and sent to Cyprus. But we used a little harbor called Port de Buc. Port de Buc is also the port that the Altalena sailed from.
Okay.
Right. Now in Marseille, although it was a Haganah camp, I was also contacted by my buddies
In Beitar.
in Beitar. And I was almost of the Altalena, incidentally, because they were going to sail earlier. I came when the first ceasefire.
So you came after Israel's declared.
That's
Israel's
right.
declared, you're in Marseille?
Right.
Okay, you remember the moment?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So the Altalena left before you.
The Altalena left. The state was already established.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Altalena came in June
Altalena,
48.
that's right. No, I came after the first
Ceasefire.
ceasefire.
Yeah. The Altalena happened during the first ceasefire.
That's right.
Right.
And I came, the UN, the United Nothing to this day, they had an army against allowing guys of military age to come into the country. I came to Israel under the name Jacob Gratz.
What's that?
Jacob Gratz.
What's that?
That was my passport name.
What ship, what's the name of the ship that you come in?
I don't remember. It was a freighter, as you can see.
Okay.
I should have written it down. I think it was a Romanian freighter. It was a freighter. I remember
So
we
it-
slept.
so it
we
wasn't-
slept on hammocks.
So it wasn't a ship
And it was
with
very-
refugees. It wasn't a full. It wasn't like a Haganah Exodus boat. It was a normal passenger boat.
Yes, no, it wasn't a
Freighter,
passenger.
freighter.
No, it was
Freighter.
It was a freighter. No, it was a ship hired by the Ghana, of course.
So it was packed with refugees.
Yes.
How many
So I
people
came-
were on the boat?
I don't remember.
100, 200, 1,000?
Yeah, it was no, maybe a couple of hundred.
Okay.
Um,
Do you know what date you arrive in Israel? Because it's Israel now. It's not
Yeah.
Palestine.
But as I say, I came with an Austrian passport,
Okay.
the name of Jacob Gratz, and they asked me, you know, the UN bastards,
Who asked you?
the UN people.
Where?
At the port in Haifa.
There's no UN people there.
Yes, they were there to see, not to allow people of military age to come into the country.
But Israel's already a state.
Observers, that didn't matter. During the ceasefire, they had UN people
Okay.
making sure that
So
no.
what do they say? So what happens?
So I said, ja, ich bin in Wiener. Sprechen Sie Deutsch? I gave him a Viennese accent. Ja, natürlich, ich bin ein Deutscher. And yeah, so the buses were waiting for us to take us to Pardes Khana was the camp that they took us to. Those days it was later became an
Mahamesh
aliyah. Yeah, it became actually the Temarim, they were put there. What was it called?
Pardes Khana Kalkul.
Pardes Khana. I forgot what it was called. In fact, I fell in love there with a Yemenite girl.
Very dangerous.
Yeah. Whose father said, "Biti papam lo tithathen im Ashkenazi,"
Yeah.
and she listened.
And she
But
listened,
anyway, yeah. So as I handed in my passport,
Okay, and the UN.
and 2 weeks later another Jacob Gratz came.
It was all forged.
It's amazing, of
Yeah.
course.
So when you land in Israel, you land in Haifa.
Yes.
The UN gives you problems, but you manage to go in.
Yeah, no, you know.
And you go to Pardes Khana. Is that where they take you?
Pardes Khana, right?
Now the war's going on.
Yes, yes,
You're 19.
yes, and I was put into Khativat Negev.
Chativat Negev.
Yes, a very famous Khativa.
Okay, so tell me about this. So they take you to Pardes Khana.
Pardes Khana, and we we patrolled the area.
Wait, don't they train you at all?
Yeah, but we were trained in Germany.
Okay.
So, you know, but they train. But they train. They trained us to say in Arabic when we capture a prisoner, Erfa idak. Raise your hand. Barudia, the buckets on the ground. Shu esmak. What's your name? And in Hebrew, all the different weaponry, Agdoach and Roveh and...
So where do you go?
We went...
Chativat HaNegev.
Chativat HaNegev.
Chativat HaNegev is Palmach or Haganah?
Palmach, it's the Palmach unit. Absolutely. But by that time, Ben Gurion demolished the Palmach as a Palmach. It became still a very famous unit. I mean, we had amongst ourselves, we had the Shuarei Shimshon. You know,
Chativat HaNegev.
Chayot HaNegev.
Right?
Yeah, there was a
They were the
play.
commando unit.
There was a play, Chayot HaNegev Baot Ha'ira. And of course we didn't shave.
You had beards.
We out there from Beersheba to Beersheba.
So were you in any battles? Or were you...
Yes, of course.
Please tell me.
I was in Kibush Beersheba. And further south. And we had... did you ever drive from Beersheba through the Arava, to the... Do you know the mountains, the Serpentines? But today it's called Malei Akravim.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
There's no road.
Right.
We went, but my vehicle was a Zachar.
2 wheels in front and the half tracks.
Not half track.
Half tracks. So you are, what's your job in your chativa? What do you do? What's your, like, are you a radio operator? Are you a machine gunist? Are you a mortar? Like, you're in the infantry.
I was in the infantry.
When do you see your first action? Do you remember the first time that you remember seeing
first action? We used to raid the Gaza. We were stationed in Tel Nof at that time.
Okay.
And we used to raid the Gaza Strip. And if we let off a couple of bursts in the machine guns, they replied with margemot. And we slept, but they didn't. Their aim was terrible. We used to walk upright. We didn't even... in those days, the Egyptian army was terrible. Unfortunately, today it's a different situation. They became brave.
And you are, you're given a mispar ishi, right?
Yes.
You're Israeli now.
Yes, 5440.
And you're in Tzahal. Right?
Yeah, in Tzahal, absolutely.
Chativat HaNegev.
That's right.
Tell me about the kibush of Beersheba.
Kibush Beersheba, we started the operation, I think, at about 11 o'clock. It was finished by 4. They ran off. Yesh Omrim said, somebody even said that they had women, but they took them, the Egyptians took them with. We didn't find any women. We were told not to rape any women. It wasn't a Jewish thing.
When do you, I'm just trying to figure
But I
out.
took, in Beersheba, I took a storefront, and I put a board across, said, Chayal Batzava, and I thought I'll find it. And then, it was a small town.
Yeah. There was nothing there.
It was just a large village. Do you know Beersheba?
Where is that? Yes.
In Beersheba?
Yeah.
And there's a British cemetery.
First World War.
That's right. And we put the prisoners in the mosque. And in fact, maybe it shouldn't be known, but I took a carpet.
From the mosques? From the mosque, yeah. Well, it was, how were the people with you in your unit? Were you people also from Holocaust survivors?
Not too many.
No, you're now meeting sabras.
Not too many, because they were, you know, most
Did
of
they
it
look at
became,
you, did they look
you
at you
didn't speak
different?
it.
Did they look at you different?
No, I talked with them. They said, I was asked, why didn't you resist? He said, are you kidding? Look at me. Didn't resist? I'm alive. If I wouldn't have resisted, I wouldn't be alive today.
That's what
I
they
said,
asked
I
you, why
thought,
did you resist? That's what they. That's
willpower. I said, you willpower, what are you talking about? We resisted. We stayed alive. We didn't want to give Hitler a posthumous victory. And because don't forget, I spoke Hebrew.
So you spoke Hebrew. That's right. That's right. And what happens after the conquest of Beersheba?
We continued.
Negev goes. You guys go all the way down to Rash Rash.
That's
no?
right. Rash Rash. Kurnub was Arab name. I don't know what they call it
That's
now.
Mivtza Dani.
All right.
I think Mivtza Dani. It's the Kibush Negev.
Yeah. And down to the Dead Sea. And you know, today the Dead Sea, you got to walk a distance before you come to water. Sure. It was right by the road.
Yeah.
And you know, the British, they left roads, they were fit for carriages and horses, not for the kind of traffic that Israel has. For instance, we practiced, I mean, our חיל האוויר practiced when they built the road, Tel Aviv Haifa. So before the road opened to civilian traffic, we were exercising on the road, and our חיל האוויר was practicing strafing moving vehicles. And I think I told you the story with the orchestra that by the Dead Sea.
Well, that's what I want. I was told to ask you about. What is the story of Leonard Bernstein?
Absolutely.
What happened?
It was a hot day. We were by the Dead Sea. We went.
War's going on.
War's going on. But we were at the Dead Sea. We're relaxing, and we're bathing in the waters. No bathing suits. Who had bathing suits? We were naked.
Yeah, naked.
In fact, we had a couple of women with us. They didn't care. Yochevet. Where's her picture somewhere around here?
We'll find it. Okay.
That's my mefaked machlaka Israel Cohen, and this is Yochevet.
Who was Yochevet?
Yochevet was a lieutenant. She played an MG-34 like Stradivarius.
What's an MG-34?
Machine gun, German machine gun.
So Leonard Bernstein, you're in the
Yeah, so we're at the Dead Sea, and he says a bulldozer is flattening down an area for a plane to land, and we're to go, and we'll pick up musicians that come to entertain us. Don't forget, we had in the army Shoshana Damari, Batron, all kinds of entertainment, you know, in the units to entertain. You know, morale was very, very important.
Sure.
So, we're going to pay. Yeah, we're given an order to go a couple of schalim to pick up the orchestra. We come, and the Dakota, which is the civilian DC-3.
Dakota, yeah.
And doors open, and who is there? Stayed at the door? Lenny Bernstein. And I knew about Lenny Bernstein because I like jazz and I like music, so I knew the name, you know. So, in a very hot day, and then the musicians start to come off, a bunch of yakkers with their instruments, suits, and vests and ties on this hot day. But they came, and it was a fantastic concert. It was absolutely beautiful. It gave, you know, ruach.
Sure.
Ruchaniyut is very important.
Did he talk to you guys also? Was he friendly? Was he?
Yeah, sure. Very much so. He was a Zionist. And he did a lot for Israel. So it was very nice.
This was by the Dead Sea?
This was by the Dead Sea. Yeah. And it was exciting. You know, we, especially the soldiers from the Sheeret HaPlita, I think it was also general in the population. The spirit was such that you said, well, for 2,000 years, we went from country to country, pogroms and all kinds of horrible things, not even talking about the Shoah. Throughout the years, I mean, Tisha B'Av was a fast. If we would have to fast for every terrible thing that happened to us Jews, we wouldn't eat anything. So here, the Ruchaniyut was such that here is a chance to re-establish a country, and if we don't do it now, forget it for another 2,000 years. And although I was brought up as a Beitari, kol hakavod to the kibbutzim from the Shomer HaTzair, they were placed on the borders, and they took they were the beginning of the fight, and they didn't give up, and they did fantastic things.
Is there anything about the war that we didn't talk about that you wanna?
Yeah, and yes, several things.
Okay, please.
Our unit we crossed, we were going to Egypt. This was around, I think, Hanukkah time,
49.
49.
48.
No, 48.
48.
And we were going, and with the scouts, with some Bedouin scouts. In those days, the Bedouins were our scouts, a lot of them. In fact, I learned how to make hummus from them. And we came with our vehicles, and we couldn't cross the sand. So the Professor Sukanik, what was his name, the chief of operations, he was an archaeologist. Father was an archaeologist. Yigal Yadin. He came down in a small plane, and he said, "Yesh por mishu chumash," and a chumash was found, and he says, "There has to be a road here, a passage, because it says Vayisu, when they traveled, they knew where they traveled. It was an archaeologist." So a bulldozer came from Mishmar Negev, and sure enough, with the bulldozer we passed. And we took the airport at El Arish, and we saw from a distance a plane and a tank, and we saw, oh, we're capturing good stuff. They were blown up, they were phony, what do you call it? Dum-dums. But I think one plane was found, and then we went to Abu Agela, and we came to Abu Agela, and we took a bay. What happened? Our Yemenite-speaking soldiers, they had. That's a base here and a base here and a base here. We went around and took this base and said, "Come, we need help," in Arabic, to come to to defend base X.
Yeah.
And we waited for them.
Mm-hmm.
We waited for them. If I remember correctly, we took 96 vehicles of various kinds. I went to a tent that belonged to a captain, and I found a pair of pajamas, a Luger Parabellum, first of all, which was yeah. Do you know what a Luger Paravana? You can kill an elephant with it. Fantastic gun. And a pair of pajamas from a Cairo department store, still in the cellophane wrapper. I wore it for years. So, anyway, all of a sudden, on the 8th, I think it was the 8th day of, Hanukkah, we saw our people, they shot down 6 Spitfires.
Egyptian Spitfire.
Egyptian Spitfires, but flown by Brits. You know about it? And all of a sudden, we see it was a white plane with 4 engines, about 100 yards to our right of our road, and it starts to drop bombs. We were, on an empty sand field, and we were told that the Brits gave Israel an ultimatum that if we don't withdraw within 24 hours, they will come in on the side of Egypt and attack Israel. Did you know about it? So it was the 8th day of Hanukkah. We found barrels of gasoline, which we lined up and put one on top of the middle for a shamash, and lit it up, and got on to our vehicles, and singing in the middle of the night, we went back to Israel territory.
So you lit the Chanukiah in
Yes,
Egypt?
in Egypt, in Abu Agela.
In Abu Agela?
Yeah, you never heard about it? Did you interview anybody from Khativat Negev?
Sure.
And they didn't tell you about it?
No, not that I remember, but it could be.
How about the rest that I'm telling you
Sure.
about?
Abu Agela, and what about Fallujah?
Fallujah before, yeah. Fallujah, Israel did a very smart thing. Major Nasser was in command,
Yeah.
and he was given the privilege of going back to Egypt with the rifles on their shoulders. They surrendered, went back to Egypt after the fights. Also, what I didn't mention to you, in Abu Agela, myself and a guy from Turkey, his name was Moreno. He spoke Ladino.
Uh-huh.
And we were chasing after half a dozen Sudanese tall guys. And in the they're like sagebrush. And we caught them. But they had Enfields, British rifles, and the bullets. We emptied the bullets, make sure there isn't a bullet left in the magazine, and threw away all the rest of the bullets because they were heavy. They had a lot of them, and we marched them in, and our guys were walking in with the rifles on their shoulders.
Sudanese. Did they speak English?
I think Moreno, spoke a little better Arabic.
How many Sudanese did you capture?
6. And what we were wondering, to this day, how come they didn't shoot at us? They were hiding behind sagebrushes. They had a chance to shoot us, and they didn't. In those days, it was Egypt that was in charge of Sudan.
Yeah.
So they served in the army. Tall guys.
Big guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's small little Jews.
And you mentioned that you were also in Malak Rabim,
Yes,
clearing
sure.
the road. Wasn't that clear?
No, we lost our supply truck with trying to go through Malak Rabim. There was no road.
Because you're trying to get down to El Rashash.
Yeah,
Is
but
that
first we had to get up. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
Today it's a beautiful highway.
Wasn't
I drove
weren't they plowing the road there also, and at the same time? Did you eventually make it to
I drove-
Rashash?
Yeah, sure.
make it there?
Yes.
That's probably where the war ends for you, no?
Yeah.
That's
but-
already
no,
the-
no.
that's already
Well, we crossed into Egypt after. We crossed into Egypt after.
After Eilat?
After Rashash. After Kurnub, I think. Rashash. First comes Rashash, then comes Kurnub.
Where's that?
And then going south.
Where? Where is it?
After Rashash.
After Rashash is on the beach.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mashrafa, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mashrafa. The Maria Krabim. Mashrafa. Anybody give you this name?
No.
No. That was the name. Well, of course, Rashash was
Was there a
Eilat.
battle there? What was going on there? Or-
Was a Jordanian base there. It was the first time.
So it was on the other side of the border.
It was the first time that we had action against Jordanians.
So it was, it was on the east side. Of,
The only time.
yeah. And what happened there?
They went back later on. Interesting. One of my trips to Israel went to Eilat, and I had some friends in the Cheil Hayam, and they had a building overlooking Jordan.
Yeah.
And been incredible. No, what do you call it? What's the matter with me?
Take your time.
What do you call it?
Binoculars.
Binoculars. Sorry, I beg. The binoculars from here to the end of the table. You could see what they were having for a meal. But today you can go to Jordan.
No problem. So when the war ends, are you in Rashash?
No, the war ends
March 49,
March 49.
something like that.
Yeah, we came to Sarafand al-Amal and for Shikhrur. From Sarafand al-Amal. Actually, first we came to Tel Nof. Tel Nof, half of the base of Tel Nof was the Cheil Avir, and we were on the other half with our armor. And we were invited for Neshef. We were invited for a Neshef. It was Purim time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was dancing with an American nurse, a non-Jewish
Volunteer.
A shiksa. And a shiksa. It didn't bother with Jewish girls for that purpose. And yes, that was the very first time that I was ever a little bit tipsy. I don't drink.
Yeah.
But
You did on Purim.
yes.
And then you get discharged from the army, is that correct?
Then I got
An
discharged.
honorable discharge from the army.
And you see.
Yeah, we're going to look at that very soon. And you know, you survived the
I
Holocaust.
also have an.
You survived the Holocaust.
I also have an haute commemute.
Yes, well, yeah. You survived the Holocaust. You fought in the War of Independence. And you're only 20 years old at the time. 18 and a half. You're a kid.
I had a terrific post with tenure. The tenure came when I was already in France. I was the Pakid Rashi למשרד הרישום in מחוז נתניה. And most of the identifications with the pictures had my signature on, so they were able to go and buy. Everything was cena in those days.
Exactly.
So you
Tough
needed.
times.
So my signature is on a lot of the identification.
And you end up leaving Israel when? When did you leave?
In 1950. in 1950.
And you go meet your father?
No,
No.
I didn't go to the States.
Your father moved to
I
the
went,
States?
yeah, I went
Where
to
did
the
he move
States.
to?
To New York.
To New York.
He had a
With
fur
his
business.
wife?
Yeah, and my sister. He went into the fur business
In New York.
in New York.
Yeah. And you came to Canada.
And yeah, so he started to I had Minui, as I said, and a job for life.
What's that?
I had a job for life
You had a job?
in Israel
As what?
when I came out of the army in Misrad Harishum in Netanya.
Okay.
And my dad met Ben Gurion in 1946 in Germany. And he wrote to Ben Gurion that Ben Gurion should tell me to come to New York.
And?
And he started to write letters to me.
Who?
My dad.
Your dad.
That I should come to, he's only remaining child, and I should join him. And I said, eventually I wanted to go to New York, and I wanted to volunteer in the army. But they said no, so he made arrangements for me to come to Canada, and it was the best thing he did.
And where did you arrive in Canada? What
In
city?
Halifax,
In Halifax.
Pier 21. It was amazing. I went back from Israel to France. I spent 8 months in France.
What were you doing there?
But we're doing nothing. My French family survived in a little village called Espoyer in the Pyrenees Mountains as non-Jews. And in fact, my youngest cousin Andre was born there, and he was baptized in the church. And I met the priest. I arrived on Tuesday, but summertime. They brought my auntie was a very clever woman. They lived in Paris, and in those days, the flics, the police, used to have they were on the same beat for many, many years. And this cop who knew my auntie, he says, Madame, he says, they're coming for the Jews, you better leave Paris. And she had 5 children. And unfortunately, the oldest one, Raymond, was killed in the Algerian War. And she went to the Pyrenees Mountains in a little village called Espoyer, not far from Lourdes, which is a very famous Catholic pilgrimage place. And she put on peasant clothing and she bought a farm. They had a working farm.
I just want to just stop for a sec, and I just want to ask you, because I want to summarize our interview. By the age of 20, you've already seen death so many times.
By the age of 20, I was 120.
Exactly.
And sometimes, middle of the night, I wake up, I can't think. And my thoughts go back to what was. It's really...
What kind of thoughts?
Why did it happen? How did it happen? Why are they after us? And to this day, the anti-Semitism today, you got it in Hungary, you got the party called Jobbik Fascists.
Urban.
You got Urban, that's right. And in Poland, you saw all over the Nazis are coming out of the woodwork.
Did you want to leave Israel, or would you have stayed if your father?
Well, I was longing for my father, actually.
I'm sure.
And Canada, brought back the camp in Auschwitz. All the good stuff came out of Canada. All the stuff that was sorted from the Jews. So it had the name Canada meant something, And my dad didn't want to come to the States, so. But he came right away as soon as I arrived.
So when he came to Canada?
Yeah.
But his business was in the States?
Yeah.
Mark, we're gonna finish here. Is there anything that you want to say that we didn't talk about, or is there anything?
Well, you know, I'm a speaker in the Holocaust education, and I don't miss any words. And I speak in churches. I like to speak in churches so I can give them hell, especially the Catholic Church. There's a wonderful Seventh-day Adventist church that I spoke to with Filipinos, and the pastor of that church takes a group every single year, and he takes them to Israel. Very pro-Israel.
ידידי היקר, אנחנו סיימנו. תודה לך.
גם תודה לך.
תודה לך.